All right, welcome to everybody around the world, and welcome to all my subscribers. I have a very interesting video, very profound evidence to share tonight, and I really wanted to focus on this and stress on this element here because sometimes it's better to have one simple, hard hitting piece of proof to offer and share with people than having a long, exhaustive list, right? So, this one element here is all I'm going to focus on, and I cover it in my book in great detail. This book is available on Amazon. I am the author. Just search for my author name, Enoch the Witness. So it's in this book here. I just want to cover it in some good detail here. My other book, while I'm on the topic, is also available on Amazon, My Systematic Theology. Excellent, life-saving book. So this pertains to the end days. When potentially can the end days arrive? Now, I'm not here to focus on elements of as to are we able to know roughly when the end days may arrive, or are we not able to? But I will briefly mention, I've made lots of videos on it. It's in my book, well covered in there, proved with verses. But just real quickly off the top of my head, if we look, for example, one quick example in Daniel 12, God explicitly says that he wants us and expects us. And it essentially in almost commands, but he instructs us to take in the number that he gives us, the number that denotes the length of time from a certain event until the end of days. He calls it the end of days. And he said, blessed is he who is waiting earnestly and does come to the day years, 1335. The 1335th year in that equation, as I've shown in my book and on my videos for years, is 2023. It could be at any point during 2023. It could be at any point during 2024 due to a principle called year flux. For example, if an event took place in a January or December, that would make a difference of a whole year. However, if it took place in January in the year 2000 or December in the year 2000, even though it's a year apart, it's still the same calendar year. So you have to give a year flux for that logical reason when you're using huge spans of time in ancient dates. It's only logical. So it could actually, even though 2023, the end of 2023 could very well be the end, it might actually be because of that at any point in 2024 or at the end of 2024. Hence why my book is rightfully titled 2023-2024, Rapture and End Days. But Daniel 12 instructs us to do that. Blessed is he who waits earnestly and comes to the day. So God has told us how long the time period is, told us where to take it from, told us that the end of days is at the end of it. It's 1335 day years. And he said, blessed is he who is waiting earnestly. You're waiting for the 1335th day. So that is God telling you. This is just one example. There's other verses to help prove that we should know and must know. But that's one place where God actually instructed us to. Okay, so putting all the other side arguments aside, focusing on the element that I'm here to talk about, the prayer in Gethsemane. There is a great thing that Jesus revealed in the Gethsemane story. I'll call it Gethsemane. That's how I like pronouncing it. I don't know how you pronounce it. But anyways, Gethsemane. Okay. I think this thing that Jesus revealed has gone over everybody's heads for 2,000 years. I'd never heard anybody else mention it before. When I was doing my studies and compiling the evidence for my book, which is 7 Pillars of Scriptural Proof, like it says here, 4 or 5 of these pillars are my own unique discoveries. This Gethsemane, secret, if you want to call it that, is one of my own discoveries. I haven't heard anybody else talk about it, and it's profound. Okay, now before I read the Gethsemane story, so we understand just how deep this is going, and this is going to blow people's minds who haven't heard it before, right? But this is astounding proof and confirmation, just one of 7 pillars of confirmation that help prove when it's going to happen, according to the Bible. So before I read that story, if we look in Psalm 90, I mean, most people know, whether from Judaism or Christianity, a day with God is like 1,000 years. There's verses that say that. There's verses in Peter that say that. But more importantly, let's just look at one for a quick example. In Psalm 90, it says, for 1,000 years in thine eyes are as yesterday, for passeth on. yea, a watch by night. So everybody knows that verse, but it also says like a watch by night. So just keep that in mind when I read the Gethsemane story. So I believe it's paralleled in the Gospels, but we can look in Matthew 26 for the story. Now, I'm not going to read the whole chapter because it takes a long time to read all that. But let's see where I can read it from. Sits down and has the Passover supper with them. Well, let's see. From verse 26, Jesus was gathered with the disciples. He broke the bread, blessed it, said, "Take, eat, this is my body." It's that situation, right? And then in verse 30, having sung a hymn, they went forth to the Mount of Olives. Okay? Now, this is where Jesus warns them that he's going to die and all this, and that he's going to rise afterwards. He says in verse 32, "But after my having risen, I will go before you to Galilee." Mentions how the flock will be scattered abroad. So anyways, all this, that's about half the chapter, right? So save me reading all that. There's all this build up. And in verse 36 is where they enter Gethsemane, okay? Now, this is where the interesting thing happens. So before I start reading the exhaustive verses, I'll just tell everybody the synopsis of what's going on, okay? And show everybody the profound thing that Jesus was revealing. What we're about to hear in this story, which is paralleled in the other Gospels, I do believe, is that Jesus is with his disciples. They go out they're walking through Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane. What Jesus does is he tells them something specific, and he repeats this 3 times. Okay, so what takes place here is repeated 3 times, like it says in the Bible, 2 witnesses or even 3, right? So it's like confirmed in triplicate. That means he wants us to pay attention here, and I don't think anybody else has ever mentioned this. It's gone over everybody's head. So put your seatbelts on it and listen to this. What happens in triplicate is that Jesus tells the disciples, "Wait and watch for me. I'm going to," and don't go to sleep. He says, "Wait and watch," right? "And be ready. I'm going to go away off into the wilderness here and say a prayer. And then I'm going to come back and return to you." Now, Jesus went off into the wilderness there and said a very important prayer to God. The prayer that he says there is very important. It's talking about him passing the cup on to the Father. Okay? Now, when he comes back the first time, he finds the disciples all asleep, and he rebukes them for that. Now, one might think, well, yeah, Jesus would like them to stay awake, just that's the right thing to do in that situation, and the safe and the right thing to do. But also, he's saying it for a deeper reason. And bear with me. So he comes back and finds all the disciples awake. He rebukes them for that and says, "Why were you slumbering? Why are you so weak?" type thing. And to drill it in, Jesus is like, "Okay, now a second time, I'm going to go off and do the prayer. I want you to wait here, be ready and watching." Okay, ready and waiting and watching. These are the key elements that are always repeated. I cover this in my verses, I cover this in my books. Okay, so he tells them a second time, and this is where it happens in duplicate. This is the second time it happens. He goes away. The very same thing happens. He goes away, says a prayer about passing the cup on to the Father. Then he comes back, and they're asleep. So on the second time he returns, they're asleep. He rebukes them a second time. And then he's like, "Okay, once again, this is going to be the third time now." He says, "Wait here, be ready and watching." He goes away, says a prayer again, and when he comes back, he then gives them, he doesn't specify that they've fallen asleep again. Trust me, I nitpicked on this, but he makes a general statement, you'll see what it is, right? So he technically doesn't rebuke them for falling asleep 3 times, but the essence, what we get is the same thing literally repeats in triplicate. It happens 3 times. This is obviously happening to drive a message home. What is the direct thing that we should logically ascertain from the story? It's that the disciples who represent us in this situation, we shouldn't be falling asleep. We should have listened to Jesus's instruction, which was to wait for his return, okay, and to be ready and watching, okay? And if we were to not do that, we would therefore be slumbering. And if you're asleep, you can't be ready, waiting and watching for when he comes knocking. There's so many other verses that tie all this together. I'm just focusing on the Gethsemane story, right? So that's the important thing that's happening. The message, the moral of the story that the reader obviously is supposed to impart from it, to take away from it, is that you should not be slumbering in this instance. You should be awake, waiting and watching for the Lord's return. Okay, now the amazing thing that when I thought about this, thinking, okay, it's happening in triplicate, these are the elements, these elements are seen everywhere else where we're warned by Jesus and God to be ready, waiting, and watching for his return. Okay, and based on Daniel 12, we should know when it will happen. And there's altogether seven pillars of scriptural proof that I go through in the book. This is just one element of those seven pillars, of one of the seven pillars. But in the Gethsemane story, it became very obvious to me. As we heard in Psalm 90, we all know 1,000 years is like a day to God, okay? But it also said it's like a watch. Now, Jesus went away on watches. That's what it's called, okay? He came back from the first watch. He came back from the second watch. He came back from the third watch. Now, what this shows us is the following, okay? Like I cover in my book as well, we can know the year that Jesus was baptized and the year that he died in based on the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel in chapter 9 tells us that for when the decree goes out to rebuild Jerusalem, both street and wall, that from that point would be 483 years to when Messiah dies. Every Christian knows this. Any historian can tell you it's a basic fact that this decree took place in 457 BC. Okay? No other date is applicable. It was made by Artaxerxes, and only his, and the Bible actually says all this and backs it up as well, and it is confirmed by history. So it was in 457 when Artaxerxes, as Bible and history agree, and he made that decree that got Jerusalem rebuilt both street and wall. From 457 BC, going forward 483 years, you get 26 AD when the Messiah, Jesus, died. We know that he taught for 3 years before he died, so he was baptized in 23 AD. Okay? At 23 AD, he'd had his baptism. God, spoke from the heavens, put the Holy Spirit upon him, and Jesus was empowered, went out and did miracles, healed people, and that's when the whole mission began. Very important stuff. Okay? So the amazing thing is, and it ties into many other pillars and elements of scriptural proof from the Bible, which are all the seven pillars. Each one is from a different prophecy in the Bible that talks about a different period of time. And so this is supported in many different ways, right? This is not a narrow avenue here. This is like a lattice of support, the seven different pillars of proof. So the interesting thing is that in 23 AD, when Jesus was baptized and his mission as Messiah began, when he was approved by God, he had just fulfilled, his role in the sense that, well, you know what I mean, by defeating Satan at the temptation. Okay, before that point, he hadn't been approved. It hadn't been like finalized, right? He defeated Satan in the final trials of temptation. He went on, then got baptized, the baptism of reformation that John did. And at that point there, God spoke from the heavens, decreed who he was, approved him, sealed him with the Holy Spirit, all that. That's when Jesus's, mission began in that sense, right? So from that point there in 23 AD, we have 2,000 years till 2023. So if 2023 is the end, as I've talked about so many times before, this would be 2 days unto God, 2 watches, according to Psalm 90. So then I saw the immediate connection to Jesus with the story of Gethsemane. Okay, now think about this. When Jesus was with the disciples and went into the garden, that represents when Jesus was here incarnate on the earth, walking around with the people. When he went off into the garden the first time to pray, and therefore he was gone from the disciples, that symbolizes when he was crucified and died. When he returned from the garden the first time, after that first watch, okay, that represented when he resurrected and first returned to the peoples. We all know after he resurrected, he spent time with the peoples, taught a little bit more, right, and then departed again. So when he departs again, this will be a second watch. He returns from that second watch, and what's it say? He finds them sleeping again and rebukes them. Then he goes away. So what we see is there are 3 watches, which would be 3,000 years. But the interesting thing is this. We know that from 23 AD when he was baptized and this mission began, that 2,000 years later, 2 watches later, should be the end of days with his arrival. Okay, so what we can see there is, now check this out. Don't get caught up on, oh, well, it says 3 watches and you're talking about 2. Okay, you have 3 times that Jesus has been with us, gone away from us, and returned to us. Okay, now I talk about it in the book in a little bit more detail, but I'm not here to quote from the book. There's 2 different ways you can look at it. It's either on this end of the scale or on that end of the scale. What I mean is this: the first watch could be represented by when Jesus was first here with us. When he departed from that point there, that's where you take the next 2 watches. Okay, and that would be when he returns on that third watch. That's the end of the 3,000 years. You'd have to have a solution as to what about the first 1,000 year period. Well, roughly 1,000 years before Jesus is when the first temple was built with King David and all that. That was about 1,000 BC, right? So that would be a significant time period. The other way to look at it is the 1,000 goes at the end. So in that case there, from when Jesus was on the earth with us and all that, you take 2 watches, 2,000 years, culminates with the arrival of the end days. And we do all know that there will be 1,000 year period of rest. At the end, and during that period, the earth is being reformed and all that. Or you literally reformed the earth itself. And then presumably people come back and there's a return of people to the earth and people live on the renewed earth, right? So it can fit in either sense, but clearly what Jesus is showing us is that he returns from these watches. So let me just read the verses here. So my point is, the basic gist is that he has revealed to us that after 2,000 years would be the arrival and judgment. So it doesn't matter which way you look at it in either of those 2 categories, it still proves this at the end of the day. That's why it's so fantastic. The symbolism and imagery that Jesus uses in triplicate is undeniable. So there has to be truth to this. And like I said, when you have all the other connecting evidence that points to the same years, 2023, 2024, that same period is undeniable. Here's one quick example I talk about in the book. Okay. Did you know that from when Jesus was baptized in 23 AD, if you count forward 666 years, you come to the year when the Dome of the Rock had been completed on the Temple Mount. Now, I go into that in this book here because Final Beast Kingdom was Islam. Okay, the 11th ruler is the one who built it was according to Daniel chapter 7 and chapter 10, 11, and 12. There are 10 kings who come first. The 11th king, the one who comes after them, to him it is given a time of three and a half times to rule over Israel as a beast kingdom. And from the 11th one will come strong ones who have built the abomination on the Temple Mount. So that connects into the prophecy of Daniel. Excuse me. I need a drink of water. That connects into the prophecy of Daniel, connects into the other pillars that I talk about. So everything's so connected, I almost can't talk about one thing without talking about the others, but I don't want to overexpand this video. But it connects into so many other things, right? But the fact is, 666 years forward, you ironically come to when the founding year, it was started and created in 688 AD. That's the official year, even according to Islamic records. It fits with all the maths of Daniel and the prophecies. 688. It took 2 to 3 years to actually be completed, right? But 688 is the official year. 689, that's what you get from 666. Now, that's just one little insignificant point. But from there are, now I cover this in detail in a video, so I'm just saying that in case I make a verbal mistake here. But that's one period of 666. From that point there are 2 more periods of 666, and you actually come to 2023, 2024, the very same point. So 3 periods of 666 after Jesus was baptized. Now that can't be a coincidence. And the other ironic thing is that from that point, if you're thinking about on a line, you have that center point, right? You have 3 units of 666 going forward to the end of days, right? And think about it. At 23 AD, Jesus had just defeated Satan at the last trials of temptation. He had just been baptized. He had only 3 years before he'd be put to death essentially by Satan. Okay, so from that focal point there, we have 3 dark periods of 666 until the end of days, right? But before that point, do you know how much time there is? And it's all detailed in the Bible. I got all the numbers on all the pages here, right, for everybody. All the verses where you can look it up yourself. There's exactly 11.11, and you can't go up by 0.01 or down by 0.01. It's exactly 11.11 times, and a time is 360 years. I cover that in there's verses that prove that equation as well. I cover that in the book as well. But there are exactly 11.11. 1111, that's the symbol, the number of the rapture. It's even in Revelation 11, verse 11, that's where it's talking about the rapture and people are ascending, right? The resurrection has thus occurred. The rapture and the ascension are happening there, right? So 1111 has always been that symbolism. I believe even in Judaism, I think they might even use it there. But it cannot be a coincidence that there are exactly 11.11. There's 1111 times until the arrival of Messiah, the appointing of Messiah. And then after that point, there are then 3 periods of 666. Okay, and that fits within the same timeline that is consistent throughout the book here. That all points to 2023. So you have other little things like that all just everything fits together. Okay, so that's why this story in Gethsemane is so important. So very quickly, here's the story from Gethsemane. So in verse 36 from Matthew 26, it says, "Then come with them does Jesus to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to the disciples, Sit ye here till having gone away, I shall pray yonder. And having taken Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and to be very heavy. And he said to them, Exceedingly sorrowful is my soul unto death. Abide ye here and watch with me." Right? So he's saying, wait here and watch, right? In verse 39, having gone forward a little, means he went off to go pray. He fell on his face praying and saying, My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou. And he cometh unto the disciples and findeth them sleeping. So he's returned, and he findeth them sleeping. And he saith to Peter, So you are not able 1 hour to watch with me. Watch, right? Watch and pray that ye may not enter into temptation. So Jesus is portraying falling asleep and not watching and waiting and being ready. He's portraying that and classifying it as temptation and slumbering and basically doing what is wrong. So anyways, Jesus said, Watch and pray that ye may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is forward, but the flesh is weak. Then in verse 42, again, a second time, having gone away, he, Jesus, prayed, saying, My Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me except I drink it, thy will be done. And having come, so this means in the second return, it says, And having come, he findeth them again sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. And having left them, having gone away again, he prayed a third time, saying the same word. Excuse me. Then he cometh he unto his disciples, and he saith to them, Sleep on henceforth and rest. Lo, the hour is come nigh, and the Son of Man is delivered up to the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. He is come nigh, who is delivering me up. So it's just very, very interesting that, and this is repeated in the Gospels. In each of the Gospels, whenever things are repeated in the Gospels, one Gospel have slightly different words used. And what that does, it's just like holding a diamond at a different angle. It just shows you different facets of the one thing. I'm not going to bother reading all 3 examples, but from all the Gospels, we get that story. Okay, Jesus is with the disciples. He tells them, wait, watch, and be ready. He goes away, says a very important prayer, which is linked to 2023, then comes back, finds them asleep, rebukes them, and then this repeats 3 times. Okay, so what we have during this period is from when Jesus first goes away. Okay, so remember, he's with the disciples. He first goes away. When he first comes back and he rebukes them, from that point, there are 2 more watches, right? 2 more 1,000 years. So if when he first goes away is symbolized when he first dies, and when he first comes back is when he first resurrects, okay, that's the end of the first one. So like I said, I think the first scenario that I spoke about earlier is the logical one. 1,000 years before that is roughly when the first temple was founded. Okay, so it's after Jesus resurrects that you count the 2 final 1,000 years. Now, I'm not fussed if it happens in 2026, right? It's 2023 or 2024. I even have a chapter in here where I say various reasons why it could spill over into the next couple of years after that, right? I'm not fussed if it's 2023, 4, 5, or 6. You know what I mean? I'm not going to fuss. The fact is, and the point is very, very soon. Okay, it's undeniably soon. Okay, and the other stunning thing is that from the Gethsemane story, he's talking this great prayer about handing a cup over. That links over to one of the pillars of scriptural proof that I cover in this book here. And without spending time reading the chapter, because that's another half an hour if I do that, it's a very interconnected web of verses because there's a prophecy from Isaiah. I made this discovery. I haven't heard anybody else talk about this, right? So in Isaiah, I think it's from chapter 30, but it's in my book, right? God is warning Israel that he's going to give them like a double portion of punishment. And the long story short, like micro super summarizing it for speed's sake here and now, right? It is detailed in the book with all the verses. But I thought to myself, like, this would almost be too good to be true. If I looked this up, I did all the maths, I crunched the numbers, because I had the Bible chronology timeline all mapped out, all 6,000 years anyway. So that's my first chapter. It's all there with all the verses and everything right there, right? All in the pages, all the maths, right? So I had all that to start with. So I went there, like how long each of the kings reigned and all of that, right? Everything in that equation. So I thought to myself, it would be too good to be true if there were 999 years of bad rulers in Israel over Jerusalem, and then the double portion of that as punishment that they would receive at the end of that would be equal to 1,998 years. When you add those two figures up to the historical dates, it's all detailed in the book. What does it conclude with? 2023, 2024. Okay, so King David and Solomon were good rulers, and the whole chronology is listed there. After Solomon ruled, there's remaining 999 years until Jesus is put to death. Okay, at that point there, that's the greatest hinging point of failure, and from when the punishment would logically start. I mean, it doesn't get more great as evidence. There were exactly 999 years. It's almost like it was too good to be true, but it is true. All the maths and verses are there. The proof is all in front of your eyes if you read my book, right? 999 years exactly until Jesus died. And then after that point there, you get the period of double punishment. Okay, now in the verses of Isaiah and in the verses from Jesus in the book of Revelation, it speaks about this cup of wrath into which is mingled double. Okay, and it's just striking that in Isaiah's prophecy, it's about Israel receiving this double punishment. In Revelation, Jesus identifies the great city that is spoken about so often as being Israel. It says where our Lord was crucified, right? That's Jerusalem, right? And we know from Isaiah's prophecy, it has the exact same terminology in a number of places as the Revelation's prophecy, okay? And the cup that Jesus is talking about that he's handing over to the Father is that very same cup. Jesus was about to go die, right? That's the reason why he was saying all that in his prayer. Okay, so from that point there, God would take that cup and he would mingle into it double and then hand it to Israel. And then Israel will be punished for those two periods. And what happened in those two periods? Oh, how long are those two periods again? 3 periods of 666, in which the beast kingdom, after the first period of 600, so there would be 666 years from when Jesus was baptized until when the abomination was built by the beast kingdom, the beast nation upon the Temple Mount, right? So it's like 666 years will lead you to and until, the arrival of this abomination at the hands of the beast nation. And then after then, they will rule for 2 periods of 666. Well, in truth, it's 3.5 times, which culminates in 1948. Anyways, it connects to so much. It's just unbelievable. But that's why the prayer in Gethsemane is more important than you think. The cup that he is talking about is this cup of wrath. Okay, he was going way to be killed. The cup of wrath, God would take, mingle into it double. They would receive a double period of punishment. So if they disobeyed God for 999 years, then they would receive double for that. That's 1,998 years. You do the maths like I show in the book, and boom, it culminates at the same endpoint. Okay, so all of these things are uber connected, right? Jesus going away for the 2 subsequent watches before the arrival of the end. There you go. That's the final 2,000 years. You can't get much more proof than this, right? Other than the other pillars that are in this book, how it ties into the prophecy of Daniel, right? So Daniel chapter 12, it says that from when the continual sacrifice is taken away until when the abomination is standing on the Temple Mount, there'd be 1290-day years. This is fulfilled in history. History confirms what the Bible says happened. Nebuchadnezzar came in with his empire of Neo-Babylon, ransacked the temple in 602 BC, I think it was, but all the numbers are in the book properly, right? 602 BC, he ransacked the temple and literally stopped the continual sacrifice. And then from this point, 1290 years later, precisely comes the 688 AD when Islam had conquered Israel and they built the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount. And who is the one who built the Dome of the Rock? It was the 11th ruler of Islam. According to the prophecy of Daniel in chapter 7, 10, 11, and 12, it would be 10 kings who come first, and then an 11th, and the 11th, from the 11th, strong one, from the 11th would be the period of 3.5 times. So from 688 AD, when the abomination is built, under the reign of the 11th, you have 3.5 times. That would be 1,260 years, culminating and ending in 1948. Let's look at history. What happened in 1948? Oh, that's right. Israel was reborn as a nation. The people of God got to return there. It's exactly what the prophecies say in Daniel would happen. It says that the start of this period, in chapter 12, verse 6 or 7, Daniel asked the angel about this, and the angel says, from the completion of the scattering of the holy people, there are 3.5 times until finished are those wonders. And then Daniel says, how long from then until the end? And God reveals that it goes up to the 1335th year, which means that there would be 75 years, essentially, from when Israel will be reborn and the ingathering starts. So the completion of the scattering is when the abomination was built on the Temple Mount. That was the completion. They had conquered Israel in 640 AD. Islam conquered Israel in 640 AD, but they had not desecrated the Temple Mount with the Dome of the Rock until 688. At 688, after, Israel wasn't Israel until they built the Jewish temple on the Temple Mount. You follow me? So Islam conquered in 640, but they didn't have the Temple Mount like that until they built their own monument. And Daniel says this would happen. They would build a temple to an unknown God that their forefathers didn't even know. And they would rewrite the laws and everything. It's exactly what Daniel said would happen. And it happened. So 3.5 times, 1,260 years later from the completion of the scattering, which means, and another thing people don't know is that the exile from Israel started when Rome ransacked the temple. Rome wasn't even the final beast kingdom. Rome was just the tail end of the Greco-Roman beast kingdom. But anyways, right? Rome ransacked the temple and ransacked Israel in 70 AD. The exile started then, right? But it continued for 600 years. The exile was still going up until 688 AD. At 688 AD, they had already conquered Israel, but when they built the Dome of the Rock on there, at that point there, if you hadn't left Israel, you had to be part of their system. Like, you had to either convert to Islam or be, that other class of citizen, pay a jizya tax or other list of things that may potentially happen to you, or worse. You know what I mean? Putting it lightly. So that was the cutoff point, the completion of the scattering. Scattering is exile, fleeing Israel. That was the completion of the scattering. 3.5 times later is the end of that wonders, those horrors, and it would be the inverse when the ingathering happens. Well, in 1948 was the rebirth of Israel, and it marked the ingathering of the people returning to Israel. So, I mean, it literally fulfills everything. Okay, 75 years after that would be 2023, 2024. That would be the end, the 1335th year that God told us, blessed is he who waits earnestly and comes to that time, because you go on to your lot at the end of days. It is the end of days. So it should be 2023, 2024, given the year flux, as I mentioned earlier. So we all have to get ready, right? But the prayer in Gethsemane is a serious story. That's what my video is about here. I just wanted to help show how it's all interconnected to everything. But it's a very serious story. Why do you think Jesus said it 3 times? Why do you think he did it 3 times? He didn't have to say a prayer to God 3 times. You think Jesus messed up his prayer? No. You think God wasn't listening? No. Jesus did it 3 times to drill something into our heads. What could Jesus possibly be trying to drill into our heads? Well, let's listen to what he said and what he repeated 3 times. Well, he repeated 3 times that, hey, you didn't wait, watch, and be ready. You all did the contrary, which was, do what is wrong and fall asleep. You weren't ready, waiting, and watching, right? So that's what we have to do. And why? What is he talking about there? Being ready, waiting, and watching, because he's going to go away and come back again. Well, the last time he's going to do that will be his final arrival, which is the end of days. So, yeah, it does make sense that he's cluing into his arrival at the end of days. And like I already showed, there's 2 final 1,000-year periods, 2 watches before his final return, that third and final return. Okay? So I don't think there's any doubt. And when you see how it connects to the prophecy from Isaiah and it connects into those time periods, we see all that. I don't think there's any denying it. That's what Jesus was cluing us in on with that story in Gethsemane. But it went over everybody's heads for 2,000 years. That's why I urge everybody, go get my book. Go read all the 7 pillars of scriptural proof. This book is international copyright. So you cannot photocopy and share it. But I urge you, get this book and share your 1 copy of the book or however many copies you get. Share it with your friends, your family, your churches, more importantly, so you can reach more people. You can always read from the book. I would urge people, if you're going to share the information, please read it from the book, because you don't want to get a number wrong. If you get a number wrong, people will just think the theory's bogus, right? So everything's in here. It's very concise, easy to go through, right? All the 7 pillars are broken down into 7 different chapters. I got a bunch of supplementary chapters with even more supplementary evidence and proof. So, anyways, folks, take care. God bless. Don't say I didn't warn you. There's tons of evidence in the Bible when it's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. This war with Israel and Hamas, I mean, it doesn't get any more true. This is like, it's fitting exactly into all the prophecies of Gog and Magog. And Zechariah's warnings about the end days in like chapter 12 or 14 is playing right into that in the prophecies and warnings from Ezekiel. So I got to drink water because I'm losing my voice. So anyways, take care, folks.